Console applications and output. Skeleton code. Basic code used to start a task. For us, we're going to use the below skeleton code when starting a Java file. First off, when you're making a Java file, you need to know that when you make the name of your Java file, you're not allowed to include any spaces, and each word should begin with a capital letter. For example, here where it shows file name, it says file name. F is capital and N is capital because they both start new words. And they're stuck together because spaces aren't allowed. So file name. The skeleton code for the files we're going to be using is public class file name, where you in fact write the name of the file. Anytime I have an underline under something, it means you don't actually write what it says, you replace it with the appropriate text. For example, when we make a file called hello world, we'd write hello world there and not file name. Next line is a curly brace. Later it gets closed at the end. We have public static void main string bracket bracket args, where string is capital, and string bracket bracket args is in parentheses. Below that we have curly braces, and then inside that inner set of curly braces I have code goes here. That means that's where you're going to write the code for your program. Alright, print commands. There are two print commands. The first of which is system.out.print quote text quote parentheses semicolon. The text inside of the quotes is what gets printed to the screen. And how it knows what to print is there's an open quote and a close quote. Everything between the open and close quote is what gets printed. System.out.println quote text quote parentheses semicolon. It prints whatever's between the quotes, so the text, to the screen and then presses enter or moves to the next line. So the cursor moves to the next line, so the next thing you type would be below it. So print prints text, print line prints text and then moves to the next line. For example, we're going to show you the difference between the two. If you had system.out.print hello and then followed by the command system.out.print Bob, those are both print commands, meaning it prints exactly what you had and then does not advance to the next line. So you would get hello and then Bob would follow immediately after that. If we did print ln, system.out.println hello, system.out.println Bob, the output would be hello, move to the next line. Bob, move to the next line. So directly below Bob, the cursor would be directly below Bob, so the next thing that gets print would fall below Bob. So println types the text that you gave and then moves to the next line. Escape sequences are special commands that can be used inside quotes. So remember, you have quote, text, quote. These commands can be used inside of those quotes. Escape sequences always start with a backslash followed by another character. Here's the chart of what the escape sequences are. Backslash quote displays a quote. You might be, why do we need a command to display a quote? Couldn't I just type quote? You can't just type quote because print commands expect a quote to begin the text and then a quote to end the text. If you put a quote in the middle somewhere, it gets confused. It doesn't know, wait, which quote is my beginning quote, which quote is my end quote? There's 3 of them. I don't know what to do. So we have to use a special command saying this is not the beginning or the end quote. And you can only do that inside of the quotes. So inside of the quotes, if we did backslash quote, it would display a quote. And it would know that it's not the beginning or ending quote. We can do backslash T to move over, backslash N if we want to advance to the next line. And remember, quotes are special. That's why we had to have a special command to put in a quote. But backslashes are now special because escape sequences start with a backslash. So you can't just put a backslash in the quotes. So if you want to display a backslash, there's a special command to display a backslash. It is backslash backslash, and it would display a single backslash, not 2. Now, when you're writing forward slashes, do know that you only need 1 forward slash because forward slashes are not special. Some of you are going to get confused. Which one's a forward slash? Which one's a backslash? Well, there are 2 easy ways to remember which one is a forward slash and which one's a backslash. Try to remember that you always start drawing a slash at the bottom. So When you start drawing a backslash, you start at the bottom right, and you find yourself going to the left or back. That's a backslash. If you start at the bottom and you find yourself going forward, you're drawing a forward slash. That's still going to be pretty hard to remember. So my favorite trick is when you look at the keyboard, right below the backspace is the backslash. So if you typed in a slash and you're like, oh, it wasn't near the keyboard, it wasn't near the backspace, but I think it was a backslash, you were in fact wrong. If you type a slash and it's near the backspace, it is a backslash. If it's not near the backspace, it is a forward slash. Exercise 1. We're going to write code to print openc:\\documents\englishpaper.docx. The code for that would be system.out.print open quote, meaning I want to have text, open c:\\\, takes 2 backslashes to get a backslash, documents \\, englishpaper.docx. Our next exercise is write code to print Bob is cool, meaning cool doesn't in fact have the meaning we typically associate with it. We do not actually like Bob. He's not that cool. So we had to put quotes around cool. We accomplished this with the below line of code, system.out.print, parenthesis, quote, meaning I'm starting text, Bob is \, quote, this is not the closing quote, cool, \, quote, this is not the closing quote, period, quote, this is the closing quote. We have an open quote for our text before Bob, and a close after the period. The other two are escape sequences, not typical quotes. They mean I'm doing a special command to have a quote inside of the text. Comments is text that is ignored by the compiler. Comments are used to write notes to yourself or others about your code. So if you have several lines that are difficult to understand, you can write a comment above them explaining how they work. They can also be used to temporarily remove lines of code from your program for testing purposes. So if you're like, I don't really know if I like this line of code, or this line of code has an error, but I want to see how everything else works, you can temporarily remove a line of code with a comment. All right. // starts a single line comment. That means everything to the right of the // is a comment, and that text will be ignored by the compiler. To start a multi-line comment, so if you have lots of text that you need to be a comment, instead of doing lots of single-line comments, you would just do one large multi-line comment. /* starts a multi-line comment. */ ends a multi-line comment. Everything between the /* and the closing */ is a comment and ignored by the compiler. Hello world. So now we're going to do an example of Hello World. It is a basic starting program that you create in a lot of your intro classes. So first step, we're going to open JCreator. I've made the font size in these projects really large so you can see them if you're working on a small device. First step to making a new file is File, New File. We're going to choose Empty Java File. We need a location for it. I'm going to select Tully, Desktop, Samples, Unit 2, OK. Always make sure you're saving to a location that's yours. Sometimes somebody in a previous class might have saved to their folders, and it's going to default to that location. So you always need to make sure that you save to your locations because you don't have rights to their files. So you'd be like, why won't my file save? Because you don't have rights to that destination. So we're going to name the file Hello World. Notice it's got a capital H and a capital W. And no spaces in between. We're going to start off with the skeleton code. Public class, the file name, which is Hello World, curly brace, curly brace. Public static void main string bracket bracket args for args, curly brace, curly brace. We write our code in here. System.out.println. I could use a println or a print, it doesn't matter here. And I'm going to type Hello World. So I'm going to use an exclamation. Now, whenever you're testing your programs, you always start with build file. Even if you've built it before, we want to get in the habit of always building first, then pressing play. If you just press play, it's going to try to run the file. If you had an old version of the file that worked, when you press play, it's going to show an error down here really quickly, and then run the old version of the file instead of the new one. So we always press build, and then play. Notice it says, "Hello world." And if I wanted to write a note to myself, I could come up here and say, Prince, hello, Prince, hello world. And this is not code, so when I press compile, it's a comment, it ignores it. And then I can run it. And it says, hello world. Now if I made this a comment as well, our program would not print anything because we do not have any code in our main. I'm going to go ahead and put it back. I'm also going to delete the semicolon. Notice when I press build, it says semicolon expected. If you go to build output, it gives you a little bit more information. C colon blah 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 blah, hello world.java. On line 6 has an error, semicolon expected. And the cool part about build output, usually it points to where the problem is. Right here, semicolon expected. So you go there, you put a semicolon. Compile, build, everything runs beautifully. Now let's have a little bit more complicated of an error. We're going to get rid of the closing quote. Now it gives you 3 errors. First of all, let's go to build output. So we have 3 errors. There's actually only one problem. We're missing a quote. Anytime you get lots of errors, what you want to do is fix the top error and then rebuild your program, because these may be real errors below it, or they may be phantom errors. Because of this error, it doesn't understand other code, so it produces additional errors that are not real errors. So we start with our first one. On line 6, unclosed string literal. You're going to have to get used to what some of the wording means, but I'm going to let you know. Unclosed string literal. Anytime you have text in quotes, it's considered a string. And when they say unclosed string literal, that means you started a quote, see it's pointing to this quote, and it never got closed. It doesn't know where it should have closed, but it's saying, right here, we started a quote, and it never got closed. So we go over here, we do our quote. Remember, we had 3 errors, so we've just fixed the first error. When I press compile, it all works perfectly. Those other errors didn't exist. So if we spent time trying to fix errors 2 and 3, we wouldn't be able to, because there's not really any problems with the code. Let's see what those errors were. So let's go back, and it says semicolon expected. There's no semicolon expected. It's got a semicolon, but because the quotes were messed up, it couldn't find the semicolon properly. It also says reached in a file called parsing. That usually means your curly braces are off, which is not an issue. Our curly braces are right as well. So remember, fix the first issue and then recompile, because the other issues may go away. And remember, when you're looking at errors, don't look at task view. It's a short synopsis of the error. Go to build output. It's got that nice little arrow where it points kind of where the problem is. In fact, here it's pointing at the quote. It also tells you line number and the file. Lots of useful information. So we want to always use build output. I'm going to show you what a multi-line comment looks like real quick. / starts a multi-line comment, and */. So that printed hello world to the screen. So now we're going to say goodbye world. Notice it only says goodbye world because the hello world and the Prince hello world is part of the multi-line comment. So that concludes our example. So I'm going to go ahead and close out. Goodbye, class!